Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. My guest today is Shirin Ebadi, Nobel Peace Prize winner back in 2003, a well-known Iranian human rights activist. She has been living in exile for nearly a decade. Thank you very much for being with us today. I want to begin with Iran, your country. We've seen the Trump administration vowing to pressure Iran through the harshest sanctions in history. Those were the words used by the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Are you in favor of putting more pressure on Iran and maybe usher in regime change in Tehran, or do you think this is the wrong strategy?
The first thing that I have to say is that any change in Iran must come from the Iranian people, from inside. And then the sanctions that are against the Iranian people cannot be approved by anyone and not by me. Making Iran understand that they are doing wrong should be done in a way that would not harm the people. And I have given recommendations about that. Using European satellites should be forbidden in Iran because Iran has programs in many languages for abroad, and they do it with French satellites, European satellites. Eutelsat does it. So that's what they should do. They should stop Iranian regime from sending propaganda outside their borders. Instead of that, the sanctions are just making Iranian people poorer and poorer.
Right. Another recent decision that's linked to the sanctions, obviously, to withdraw. Donald Trump decided to withdraw from the Iranian nuclear deal. Do you think it is a mistake, or do you think this was the right thing to do to send maybe a message to the leadership in Tehran?
According to the international agency, the Iranian government has stuck to their agreement, and there is no legal justification for the American withdrawal.
Do you fear that as a result, the hardliners, as they're called in Tehran, are gaining the upper hand over President Rouhani and maybe some even more liberal-leaning rulers in Tehran?
I must say that the Iranian constitution gives all the powers to the guide, to Mr. Khamenei. And so the president and all the other actors have very limited powers. If this agreement on nuclear issue happened is because of the economic sanctions of Obama's administration that made the guide accept to let the president sign this agreement, and any other president would have had to do it because it's the guide who makes the decision. I'm sorry to say that, but I don't agree with the fact that the extremists or the reformists can make the difference in Iran. It's only the guide who makes the decisions. And that's why the Iranian people want a change and a reform of this constitution, because they know perfectly that as long as we stay with this constitution and all the powers belong to one single person, no reform will work in the country.
We've seen a protest mostly about economic, social issues earlier this year. At the time, you said you think this is going to be a bigger protest wave than in 2009 after the controversial election and the crackdown, but it hasn't happened. So it seems the regime still is firmly in control, and that the opposition is not able to make its voice heard in Iran and change the situation the way you would like it to change.
Well, yes, the power is still resisting, but they should be aware that if they go on with this attitude, the country will be in a very critical situation. The Iranian people are on strike every day. They are protesting every day because of the violence that they undergo and because of the poverty that is appearing in this society and the corruption of the government.
So you think that deep down the Iranian people are still willing to change the regime, and that you expect further protest and even the regime either to crumble or to make concessions that could definitely change the course of Iran?
Of course, the protest will keep growing, and my proposal is to organize a referendum to let the people express their will to change this government, have a secular government and not a religious one. And now the Constitution lets the power between the hands of one person, whereas the people want the power back. They have no power.
I just want to talk about more personal issues. You fled into exile after the 2009. In your latest book, you explain a little bit how the regime manipulated essentially your husband. It's a very personal issue, but I think it's interesting for our viewers that you tell them how the regime essentially manipulated the situation to make sure you leave the country.
I am unfortunately not the first person that had to suffer from this kind of manipulation. I have defended many people myself as a lawyer who have also had to undergo this kind of cases. There are sex workers hired by the Iranian government in order to manipulate some people and to make these people give witnesses and testimonies that are false only under the pressure of the manipulation that they have organized. And all this is something that has happened many ways, but it's taboo in Iran, and nobody dares say this kind of methods that they have. I have been the first one to be very vocal about it and see how a government who punishes women because they show their hair on the streets are the same people who use women and hire sex workers to get to their political aim through these methods. Is this an Islamic attitude?
And this was, so for our viewers to understand, this was used essentially against your husband and to hurt you, obviously.
Yes, my husband was the victim of such a plot. But once again, he wasn't the only one. Many other politicians in opposition had the same process.
I want to get to an issue that's close to your heart, the fate of the Rohingya people. They've been persecuted in Myanmar. Many of them have fled to neighboring Bangladesh. And a former recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, Aung San Suu Kyi, has been criticized as one of the leaders of Myanmar for not doing enough. You are going further than that. You think that she should actually be tried by an international court for essentially helping what you call is a genocide.
Yes, absolutely. Aung San Suu Kyi is the leader of the party in power. So she has the possibility to orient the policy of the government and encourage them in the choices that they make. Even if she cannot do that, the least that she can do is to speak and to judge in her words what the Burmese army is doing to the Rohingyas. But she doesn't do it, and she denies the facts when she is asked about the Rohingyas in the interviews. Because of the political status that she has, she must also be held accountable for this crime against humanity.
And you think that the Nobel Peace Prize should be stripped from her because of how she acts and the fact that she's not speaking out?
Her attitude is extremely bad, but the committee, the Nobel Committee, has already said that they don't withdraw prizes because they are not responsible for what the laureates do once they have received the prize.
Okay, Shirin Ebadi, thank you very much for being with us today, and thank you very much for watching this interview here on France 24. Stay tuned for more news.
France 24, c'est la richesse de la diversité culturelle mondiale avec un réseau de correspondants à travers la planète.
En France 24 en español comunicamos a Latinoamérica con el mundo entero.
روح مهنية شعارها واحد حرية التعبير. هذه هي بصمة France 24.
Africa on France 24 is about its people and their stories.
Los ciudadanos nos cuentan cuáles son las iniciativas y las problemáticas que tienen en sus comunidades a través del programa Los Observadores. Eso los acerca aún más a France 24.